Well, there was this moment where I was pre-diabetic, I was overweight, suffering with depression, anxiety, and fresh fruit syndrome, and ADHD, and all these different things, and put on so much different medication. And I didn't want to buy another gym membership. Every gym membership I ever bought left me feeling frustrated and guilty. So a friend of mine and I, we were downtown Toronto, we're originally from Toronto, and we just stumbled upon an indoor rock climbing gym, Joe Rockheads.
Okay.
And it's 20 years ago now. Yeah, stepped inside and, right away I got up on the wall and had a panic attack and got all, the sweats and the pain in the arm and yelling at my friend, let me down, let me down. But something happened, access to what I know now as a state of flow, but I didn't know what it was then. And I got addicted to the feeling because when I would climb, I didn't think about anything. And so all those 70,000 thoughts a day that I used to go through, that most of them were, left me feeling frustrated and upset about my life and where I was at and wondering when am I ever going to have things be different and when am I going to feel better? And then when I climbed, I didn't feel that. I just was focused on my breath and my movement, and it got me connected to, I guess, my natural instincts. And that's kind of where it began for me to kind of evolve into a transition out to British Columbia just to pursue climbing. Yeah. And the pursuit of climbing led to the discovery of a whole bunch more, including plant-based eating.
That was a lifelong dream for sure to get to the Olympics, and I was a ski racer to start off with, and then I made the switch to ski cross, so 4 people going down the same course at the same time with jumps and rollers and passing and crashing. Super fun, but right before the Olympics I blew my ACL, MCL. I competed anyways because it was a dream of mine, and I came 12th. The next year I came back after my injury and I went to the World Championships and I came 2nd. But that was also on a blown knee, unfortunately. So after that, I had a really big surgery on my knee, 2 months non-weight bearing, and I decided that it was time to move on to the next thing in life, next chapter. I'll just try, eating more plants and see how it feels, and it felt amazing. I had so much more energy, and my recovery as an athlete was quicker. And then it just went on from there. I started learning a lot more about the environmental aspects, the animal cruelty and the factory farming. And I personally felt amazing, and I loved all the different recipes I was learning. It felt like the truth was coming out. So I just spewed out all of my information onto my blog, onto my Why Vegan page, and then started just uploading recipes there every single week and experimenting in the kitchen.
Nutrition was never really a part of my life, although I've always been adventurous and been an athlete. But about 7 years ago, when my girlfriend was diagnosed with cancer, she was going through chemotherapy, and I remember asking her oncologist, and well, what about nutrition? What should we do with nutrition? How do we improve the immune system? And she told us, nutrition has nothing to do with any of the recovery. It's not going to help with the cancer treatments. And I didn't know much about nutrition, but what I did know is she was wrong. I knew it had to have something to do with it. So I started doing all this research on nutrition, and almost everything I read about had to do with eating more and more plants. She wanted to treat herself naturally, and I fully supported her. So on the next step, to support her, I cut out all meat and dairy. And it wasn't long, maybe about a week of actually eating plant-based and cutting out all my meat and dairy and processed foods. And all of a sudden, I had all this extra energy. Yeah, I went from just being one of those normal people where you come home from work and you've had a hard day and it's easy to make an excuse to kind of sit on the couch and be like, oh, I deserve to kind of lay down now. And it was really sad to kind of be living that life because you're tired at 5 or 6 o'clock. And all of a sudden now it's 8, 9 o'clock at night and I still had tons of energy. And I was just whoa, this plant stuff is really making a difference.
Getting into the mountain cultures for me is definitely, that was such a beautiful thing. When I first left Toronto, I transplanted myself to Golden and lived in Golden for 4 years and started to train to become a guide. And the training to become a guide led to me discovering nutrition. And that's where I realized, wow, so this state of flow that I experience climbing, I'm also learning how to do that through nutrition. And I started to combine these two things, and I started realizing, wow, I'm eating way more plants than I ever ate. Growing up, it was all processed food, and where I get my protein from, it's meat, and calcium is dairy. And
I wasn't actually plant-based when I went to the Olympics, and then after that I got really into nutrition, and I took that course. I became a holistic nutritionist, and that's when I was introduced to all of the amazing benefits that a plant-based lifestyle can bring you. Longevity, and for me personally, I love food and I love to eat. Yeah. So the fact that you can eat more really got me. It's something so different from what we grew up with and what they were teaching, because people just weren't aware, Now we are aware of what's going on in the meat and dairy industry and how healthful a plant-based diet can be. Yeah. And you know, if you eat a variety and a lot of food, you will not have a problem with protein.
Never.
At all.
Not
That's
at all.
not even anything that you should be thinking about.
Yeah.
A ton of fiber and no saturated fat, no hormones. It really is the answer to a lot of problems.
And both of us like been kind of thriving on this together now.
Oh, that's amazing.
And just feeling so much better. And since then, actually, with all my high energy levels, I actually was reading this book about adventure racing, and I've always wanted to be a professional athlete and stuff. I always never really had the energy, and at the time I was always drinking and living this what I would call a balanced life of having fun and not caring too much about nutrition. But with all this extra energy, it's like, whoa, I think this is like the time for me.
As I began to do the climbing and getting outside more and then started adding in the nutrition, then I said to myself, wow, this is really making me feel amazing. And I realized I was actually attracting more abundance into my life. The people I was hanging out with, for one, and then on the nutrition front, it just became easier to want to take care of myself in the abundant ways.
What the really big problem is, people feel like as soon as they cut out meat and dairy, they're gonna have all this extra energy. And it's so much more than that. It's about cutting out all your processed foods along with the meat and dairy, eating a whole foods plant-based diet. Like, that's the really important part.
There is this element now, I think, when part of our discussion is that we can tap into a way of feeling more vibrant, more alive, that doesn't require outside influences other than us being able to connect to our true natural and given energy. It's just a matter of putting us in the environments that allow that to come to life.
People seem to be afraid of carbs. They're always afraid that eating too much carbs is going to make them fat, make them gain weight. And so when you look at your macronutrients, we have carbohydrates, we got fats, and we got protein. So if you cut out your carbs, that doesn't really leave you very much for energy. Like, if you want sustained clean energy for the whole entire day, you need to be packing on the carbs at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And this whole protein thing, people always ask me, well, where do you get all your protein? I'm like, the protein isn't what gives you your energy to get through the day. It's not what gives you your energy to get through a race. Even when I'm doing 24-hour races, I'm not packing on protein before the race. I'm packing on carbs that gives me sustained energy. And I'm also taking on fats that gives me energy as my carbs start to run low. I really, the protein part I consume after workouts. And that's really to help with muscle recovery a lot more than energy. And I think a lot of people don't understand that.
Well, I mean, it's such a great discovery when you find a plant that you've never really played around with. And yet it's not about, like, for the book, and what I got into was just trying to find especially plants that I was familiar with, so I didn't have to get confused about them. And then once I discovered one or two, I would just learn how to use it effectively and creatively.
Right.
So like the biggest food that I've discovered to this day, as far as plants goes, hemp seeds, hemp hearts, same thing. And when I started to add them into my diet without changing my diet, just by adding them in, I realized that because it's a complete protein, has all the great essential fatty acids, it was stabilizing my own blood sugar. You know, that might not work for somebody else, but for me, that was my experience. And I just started adding it. And so when I had that experience, I realized, wow, I'm craving this seed more and more than eating meat now. I never understood my own energy in a way that I do now. And we are energetic beings, and you know, there's a magnetic field that we're all connected to. And my own personal experience with that is that as I began to do the climbing and getting outside more and then started adding in the nutrition, then I said to myself, wow, this is really making me feel amazing. And I realized I was actually attracting more abundance into my life. The people I was hanging out with, for one, and then on the nutrition front, it just became easier to want to take care of myself in the abundant ways. And then I realized, well, there's actually a sequence I started to do that was allowing more of this to occur, and it was about how I spent the first 10 minutes of my day.
Okay.
And so I just started engaging in tension, this idea of creating goals that are worthy of my life. And the moment I started to set some of these goals, then I just began this morning routine where I'd wake up in the morning and get my bare feet on the ground, connect to the magnetic field, you know, eat a really nourishing breakfast to start the day, do some nice heart rate variability breathing, and then practice a sequence of reading out loud the goals and then doing vision boards and all these things. But it works.
Yeah.
It works in a sequence where all of a sudden you start to notice these things showing up and you're like, wow, I actually attracted this right into my life.